Szanowni Państwo,
Ladies and
jest mi
gentlemen,
niezmiernie miło
I'm extremely glad, very
Państwa
glad
na
to welcome you at the
konferencji
conference
organizowanej
organized
historią
by
ponownie.
the Dom Spotkań z Historią,
Nazywam się
Historia
Mateusz
Meeting House.
Pawlikowski.
My name is
Jestem
Mateusz
pracownikiem
Pawlikowski.
działu edukacji
I
właśnie Domu
work
Spotkań z Historią. Będę mieć
at
przyjemność
the educational
poprowadzić
department, and I'll have the pleasure to moderate
Chciałbym
this meeting.
serdecznie
I would like to welcome,
podziękować naszym
thank
gościom,
wholeheartedly to our
uczestnikom,
guests who have
wziąć udział w
agreed to
naszej
take
rozmowie.
in
Pani Gabrieli
our
Lesser,
Madam Gabriela Lesser, historian, political scientist,
korespondentka
journalist, correspondent
niemieckojęzycznych
of
z
German-speaking newspapers from Warsaw. Good afternoon. And Mr. Jacek Michałowski, he's psychologist and
opozycjoniście w okresie PRL oraz szefowi
therapist
of
the president under the presidency of Przemysław Komorowski, president of the Republic. I know that we have very many high school students for whom maybe it's the first meeting under the project.
Chciałbym poświęcić chwilę na przypomnienie założeń naszego projektu. Co więcej, sam chciałbym
Bridging the walls, we do need education. So let me refresh and emphasize that and I grabbed this opportunity and can feed my curiosity because I had no chance to remember 1989. And so the project called Bridging the Walls, we do need education, assumes involves collection and analysis of memories about 1989 Europe-wide. Cooperation initiated by Gramsci Foundation of Bologna in Italy assumes comparison, all sorts of conversations, discussions that represent different heritage of different parts of Europe, like City of Tirana Association, Past Not Past of Paris, Bielefeld University, and Contemporary History Institute of Prague. We can do it by recording interviews with witnesses to those historical events and international conferences or workshops with the young people. And to move to the factual part of our meeting, the fulcrum of our meeting will be what we have got from the interviews we've had with the Polish witnesses, transformation of the year 19. The key themes of that time, it will be a symbolic account, relation between the fall of the Berlin Wall and the roundtable talks and the election of 4th June of 1989, and the question whether the process initiated in 1989 has been completed or maybe it's still ongoing. So, Madam Gabriela, why the fall of Berlin Wall is appealing to us more than the Polish June. The wall existed for nearly 30 years. It was a real horror. It was a symbol of the divide, of dividing the world into two blocks, the Western and the Eastern one. So if a common person traveled from, say, West to East or the other way around sometimes, they had to cross that border, and there was a death zone and this checkup. So you were afraid of anything. I studied in the years 1985 and 86. So everyone from the West would smuggle something. And I was so afraid that someone could catch me on that contraband. There were dogs all the time. So overwhelming fear. When the wall fell, I was in Poland and at that time, and I was so glad that finally that there was a time, and Helmut Kohl would find the time to be in Poland. So I joined him, and I was in Warsaw when Chancellor Kohl was in Warsaw, and that was when the wall fell down. Something extraordinary. How come that we couldn't believe. And only on the morrow, when Chancellor got back home, I stayed in Warsaw. I thought, well, what's next? Will he come back? He was supposed to be through all the week. It was a very long visit scheduled, and he came back to Warsaw. I would like to add something about the round table. The round table was a fantastic thing as well, but it was a different word. It was something actually different. And there was no fear attached to that round table talks. It's where people met who want strike a compromise. So it's a different thing. And of course, we thought that everything, but no one expected the fall of the Berlin Wall, on the other hand. It was something out of this world, and people are still very happy about that, the event. So during one day only, so much happened. And while the roundtable was a long-lasting process, Jacek, what's your opinion? Why the Berlin Wall, which has become a symbol of the transformation, instead of the round table, which initiated actually that transformation? I would not agree with you and agree at the same time, because roundtable, for me and for my generation, for those who were here in this part of our camp, socialist camp as we called it, that was something. The 4th of June, it was something extraordinary. Well, okay, the Berlin Wall is without any doubt a symbol of that time. At the European scale, on the European scale and global scale, and this is, and the lady has very clearly expressed it. Berlin Wall had been there for 30 years. It was something terrible. It was a wound across the city. It was an artificial division of a normal urban body. Whenever I think about the division of Berlin into these two parts, I think also about Warsaw. And it's a clear association. During the Nazi occupation, there was a ghetto in Warsaw, the Jewish ghetto, where there was a wall surrounding part of the city. It was a city cut across. So the symbol of the Berlin Wall is a very strong one, but for me, privately, it's 4th of June, 1989, and you can see it on my T-shirt. Well, if we talk about 1989 and about the process that in particular in Poland was staged over time, in Germany, it was the 9th of November, and all of a sudden a euphoria. I wonder whether this democratic transformation, we say that it has already ended, it's completed. Gabriela, how do you think about what was initiated in 1989 has already ended, or when, or it's still ongoing as a process? I think that the process is quite far advanced, but still active. And I have no clue when it will end. But I feel that we still, from the West, we look at the East that, well, they do it somehow differently. Their mentality is somehow different. There's something different about them. And those from the East, while looking at the West, I think, well, we don't understand them entirely. There's something different about them. So society is getting close. I mean, these two societies, Western and Eastern, get closer to each other. I have a flat in the East, in Eastern Berlin. I live there with the people from the East, from the Eastern zone. I don't see major difference, but it's Berlin. So Well, how shall I put it? Often we discuss in Germany whether there are differences still or 30 years after they don't exist anymore. And well, there are such as how you pay, how high is the rent and your pension. It shouldn't be anymore. It should be equal everywhere, that your old age pension be the same, comparable, and that salary should be leveled, should be equal. Should be the same. But we have to work on it. And the mentality, I mean, we simply have to move around more, but it's not only
na przykład w Niemczech
easy,
wszędzie mówi
because
się dialektem.
say German dialects everywhere. So this has a different mentalities attached. I don't understand some Germans because of the dialects they speak and the way they think. I don't understand. So I would say that it's something exceptional that the West does not understand the East and the other way around. It's a problem in Germany as well that we cannot always communicate with each other.
Panie Jacku, pańska opinia?
Jacek, your opinion, is 1989 still present with us? Yes, it's still from my
z polskiej perspektywy, bo my nie mieliśmy zachodniej Polski będącej na zachodzie Europy i wschodniej Polski będącej na wschodzie Europy. Ja bym powiedział,
I would put it like this. The Polish People's Republic before 1989 is still deep in our heads, in our minds, especially in those of the elder generation. It's us. We remember various things. Half of my life I spent under that system, that Polish People's Republic, and half here now. So in relation to that fact, we are partly immersed in the democracy and partly mentally in the PRL, Polish People's Republic. You, young generation, fortunately don't have it, don't have this way. The consequences of that our expectations, that the state will do it for me, that Warsaw, not us at the local government level, do it's still in us. Our willingness to have authoritarian state that will take the decision for me, a little human being. It's still, I fortunately don't see it among the young generation. I see. Well, to a certain extent, I would lie, but it's to much lesser extent than in my generation. So I think the process must nearly end with our with the passing away of certain generations raised and somewhere in the guts on back of the head they have it. That's one thing. I can still remember, well, now Polish state feast, the 3rd of May. It's that of my great-grandparents. 11th of November, that of my parents. I don't remember either the 3rd May of when the Constitution of the 18th century, or no 11th November 1918. It's not my festive day. Do we have our own? Yes, it's the beginning of our systemic transformation. The 4th of June 1989, the election to the well, contractual to the lower chamber, the parliament, but 100% to Senate. And these 32 years that have elapsed from that time has been the longest time of freedom during the last 100 years in Poland. The period between the war, it was only 20 years or less. So in other words, I think that say 10 or 20 years, the transformation will reach it's a young generation raised in this democracy where freedom, where open borders, not living in a camp is your experience. I just wonder, for my generation, for me, the 4th June is that like the 11th of November to my grandparents or parents. Will be your festival. You don't remember it, 4th of June. It won't be. So I thought, well, I wonder. You'll see in a couple of years whether the end of pandemic will maybe the festival of freedom. It's another type of feast, of festive day.
Yeah, let's hope so. Let's hope so that it's going to be soon. Now, continuing this theme of 4th of June, Mr. Jacek, how should celebrate it, since this is the celebration of your generation? How we should talk about it? What should be happening? What would you imagine? I don't agree with you at all. Immediately, we shouldn't do anything. You said what we should do. I would like this to be a happy holiday of freedom, of joy, and that there would be dances. This year it's not possible because we have the pandemics. We need that joy, this happiness. This should be the excuse to not to remember solemnly how we were fighting the communism, but for this to be a holiday, a celebration of a discussion, communication, conversation, youth and other generations about the values that existed then. What we've recovered at that time, this huge chunk of freedom, because earlier this freedom was restricted, is also your experience. The feeling, the willingness to have freedom, restricting freedom, this is something that every generation experiences. Of course, everyone differently because the conditions are different. So, conversation about values. Let's talk about values on the 4th of let's dance on the streets. Yeah, because this is problematic, that what is happening on the 4th of June is problematic. There is a series of discussions here in this house of talking about history, but there are many institutions where it's lacking. And Gabriela, how do you perceive the 4th of June in Poland? What it could look like? I think that in Poland it was celebrated in the past, and there were a lot of celebrations. But in the recent years, I don't remember at all for this to be a holiday or a celebration. And it's a pity, because in the past, the whole world was looking at doing this. Yes, of course, the round table. So in other countries, people were also asking Poles, how did you do it? How did you reach a compromise? And how did you organize the elections? Because you didn't have the possibilities, you didn't have access to the press, to the media. How did you do it? How did you achieve it? And this was the export of Poles, of the Polish model of compromise. This model of achieving your target, your goal. And as much as I'm a bit surprised. Well, I'm a journalist. And if there are no celebrations, what am I supposed to put in my press account? The fact that there are no celebrations or that people don't know about it? Well, we simply don't write anything about it.
Wejdę w słowo, szczególnie, że
Sorry to
rzeczywiście ten
interrupt,
okrągły stół to jest taki
but
piękny
the round
symbol.
table is
Właśnie
such a
o
beautiful
ile
symbol.
mur berliński jest
As
symbolem
much as
jakby
the
krwawego podziału,
Berlin Wall is a
o
symbol of
tyle
this bloody division,
symbolem w pewnym sensie negatywnym.
and
O
it's
tyle
in a
okrągły stół
sense
jest
a
symbolem
negative symbol.
rozmowy.
The
Mniejsza
round
o to, jakie
table
były
is a symbol
motywacje
of the
byłych
conversation.
komunistów
Oh,
i tak dalej, i tak dalej.
Let's not
Ale jest
mention the
jednak
motivations
symbolem
of the former
dogadywania
communists, but this is a
się,
symbol of
przekonania się
coming
po
to an
partnersku.
understanding.
Pozytywny symbol. No.
It's a
I
positive
przemoc.
symbol.
To jest już od średniowiecza, tak? Ten mebel, właśnie ten.
Well, this piece of
Król
furniture
Artur,
exists
król Artur, tak jest.
since the Middle Ages.
jest
The
to
King
jest
Arthur, yeah, of course.
Ta nasza historia ostatnich
But
30
our
lat
history of the
no,
last 30
doprowadziła do
years
tak daleko
has
idących podziałów w naszym społeczeństwie, co
brought
do
about
wartości
such
okrągłego
deep
stołu, że jest
divisions in
poddawane
our
wątpliwości.
society
Mimo,
insofar
że
as the
cały
values
świat,
of the
tak jak
round
pani
table, that
Gabriela
it's
mówiła,
now
patrzy w
doubted,
80
although the
dziewiątym
and Gabriela has said was looking at us with awe. I had the opportunity in 1989, right after the elections, to work in the office in the bureau of the Senate. This was the first one that was created because the Senate.
W 1939 roku przestał istnieć. I do nas wtedy po prostu przyjeżdżał cały świat, patrzył na nas.
The whole world was coming here to watch us, looking at us. How did you manage to go from communist to democracy without spilling any blood? How is it possible? So it is worth it to talk about the round table on the 4th of June at round tables and also to disseminate knowledge about it.
Proszę.
Sorry, I would like to say something more, if I may.
Jestem,
Of course.
fascynuje mnie Warszawa.
I'm fascinated by Warsaw. So I'm also a guide.
Mam gości z Niemiec.
I often have guests from Germany. And when I tell stories, I present Warsaw as from the political point of view, political perspective and civil society perspective. And of course, I say that here we have the presidential palace and there is the greatest, the most famous piece of furniture in the world, the round table. And everyone says, wow, we want to see it. And then there is a problem because foreign guests do not have access. So you cannot enter. If this is a group tourists, yeah, who pay for traveling, they don't have access. I tried to somehow arrange a visit there. To go to this room to see the table. I tried, but I never succeeded. So it's a great pity, I think. It's a shame. And I know I have this experience, so I always have a picture, a photo, and I simply show them, this is what this piece of furniture looks like, which is inside, unfortunately. We cannot enter as tourists. So I think this is something to reconsider, that the administration of this building might reconsider if maybe they could allow foreign tourists, foreign guests to visit.
Niesamowicie jest to znaczące, że właśnie się
Yeah, I think it's very significant that
naszej rozmowy i o tym,
this
jak
table
się
cannot be
pamięta,
seen
czy
in the
promuje
context of our
polską
conversation,
perspektywę. To nawet się nie da
and so far as how we remember, how we promote Polish perspective, that we cannot see the most famous piece of furniture in the world. And everyone was so jealous of the symbol of this process of transformation. So we are appealing to the Mr. President Duda to make it available not only to foreign correspondents and guests to have access to this wonderful piece of furniture. And since we're talking about creating special days, special holiday celebrations, remembrances, I would like to go back a few months in time, because when we were recording our interviews with the witnesses to history here in Warsaw. At the same time, in Belarus, there were very strong, the strongest street rallies, demonstrations. It's impossible not to notice some similarities insofar as these processes. Is there anything happening right now in Belarus which is similar to 1989? Polish experiences, European experiences, can they be compared somehow to this situation now in Belarus?
Bardzo chciało, żeby do niego jak najszybciej doszło.
Well, I would like these transformations to finally take place. Lukashenko is still convinced that he's the best solution, but sooner or later this has to end. History says that it has to end. Let's hope it's going to happen as soon as possible. Recently, lately, I did an interview with Lech Wałęsa about it, and I was asking him how he sees it, where Belarusian society is right now. Can it be compared with any historical situation in Poland? Maybe 1981 or earlier or later. And he said that 1981, it's too late, that he sees the situation in Belarus rather compared to the 70s in Poland. I was thinking about it for a bit, and I have to say that he might be right. I think that Belarus, of course, there might be something like the fall of the wall happening, but I cannot see it. I expect it, so I'm rather counting on a round table one day in Belarus, but it's going to take some time. Yes, I also compare with Belarus with 1966, when workers were pacified, when they were beaten, put in jails, expelled from work in Poland in 1976. And then the Committee of the Defense of the Workers was created. Finally, the intelligentsia and workers together. And later steps after 1966, this was the continuation, the consequence of it. But the fact that the society together in Belarus, some symptoms of that, the various social groups are starting to think together, do exist. Well, let's hope that it's going to happen faster than it was happening in Poland in the past. Well, now changing the subject into an all-European perspective, I would like to ask Madam Gabriela if, in your opinion, young Europeans are aware of 1989, what has happened in 1989. I just want to tell you that I'm connected from Torino. I'm in Italy right now, and I have the opportunity to talk to my peers about 1989, compare our histories, and I'm not going to hide that it's extremely difficult. This is very difficult to find a common theme, how to talk about the newest history. So in your opinion, do young Europeans know what has happened in 1989 in other parts of Europe? Not necessarily. They don't necessarily know it, both in Poland and in Germany. The same problem is that in schools, there is certain curriculum, and what has happened within the last few years, or let's say the last 50 years, unfortunately, they don't have enough time to do it, and people don't read as many newspapers, and very often they simply don't know. But they have heard something at least. There are some traces left. If I show Gdańsk,
no to oczywiście zawsze
I
pokazuje też
always
Europejskie
show
Centrum
the European
Solidarności.
Center of
I
Solidarity,
ludzie
and
są
people are
zafascynowani
fascinating.
i chcą to zobaczyć.
They want to
I
see
chcą
it. They
wiedzieć
want to
więcej,
learn
i
more
jeszcze
and more and
więcej, i
more.
jeszcze
Then
więcej.
they want to
Potem
see
chcą
the
zobaczyć stocznię
shipyard
i jak
and
najchętniej
talk
z kimś
about it.
rozmawiać.
So we
Więc
have to
trzeba na miejscu
awake
budzić
interest, raise
zainteresowanie
interest,
i
and
potem
afterwards interest
zainteresowanie
does
jest.
exist, and this
Więc to
functions
tak
very
bardzo
well.
dobrze funkcjonuje.
In
Tu w
Warsaw,
Warszawie nie ma tak dużo,
there
nie
is
ma,
no
nie ma
good
dobrego
museum about
muzeum na
Solidarność
temat
Trade Union.
Solidarności.
Maybe
No to
that would be
byłoby
a good
jakiś pomysł
idea
może.
about the
Zrobić
Solidarność
też w
movement.
Warszawie
Maybe
jakiś
it would be a
muzeum
good
na ten
idea
temat.
to do that, to organize a museum
Z
like that.
kolei w
In Berlin,
Berlinie
you don't have to
Berlinie nie
wake
trzeba
interest
specjalnie
because
budzić
you can see
zainteresowanie,
part
bo co
of the
kroku
wall
jest część
every step
muru,
you take,
albo
or there
jest
is a
jakieś
museum
muzeum,
or
albo,
some other
albo
place of
jest,
commemoration
jakieś miejsce,
of the victims
które
of the war
upamiętnia
or
ofiar
of the
tego
victims
muru
of
i
this
tam
death
tej-
zone,
tej
etc.
strefy śmierci
So
i tak dalej.
you walk around
Więc,
Berlin,
chodzi się po Berlinie,
and
zwłaszcza
because of the fact that the
ten mur
wall
był w
was
środku,
in the
w środku
middle of
Berlina.
Berlin, so if
I
you're in the
jeśli
city
jest się w
center,
centrum, to
everywhere,
co
all the
chwilę
time, you
jest
see
tam
something
coś
related to
związane z rokiem
1989. Reichstag
89.
also.
Też
There's a
Reichstag
part
na
of the
przykład. Tam
wall
jest część muru stoczni
of
gdańskiej.
the
Więc,
Gdańsk
to
shipyard.
jest
So
nawet część
some of
właśnie
the Polish
historii
history is in Berlin, and
polskiej,
people are
znajduje
interested
się w
in it.
Berlinie.
They
Ludzie
ask
się
about
tym
it. What is it?
interesują,
Why?
zapytają,
So
co
in
to jest,
Berlin, you
dlaczego
don't
i tak
have
dalej.
to
Więc w Berlinie nie trzeba
raise
specjalnie
awareness
budzić
or wake
zainteresowanie,
interest
bo
because
co
there are a
kroku
lot of
tam coś
things
jest,
everywhere.
co budzi
In
to
Warsaw,
zainteresowanie.
well, you
W
do have to
Warszawie,
do it. You
no,
have to
w
attract
Warszawie
people to
trzeba
the
budzić
subject.
zainteresowanie tym tematem. Skoro
You just
też
you
na
can't
przykład
see the
okrągłego
round
stołu,
table
no,
either.
nie widać po prostu.
It's very interesting that young people,
Ale to jest szczególnie
that
ciekawe, że
people
właśnie,
in general want to talk about it. They want to
młodzi,
learn
w ogóle
about it, and
ludzie
this is
chcą o
really
tym
lacking.
rozmawiać,
These
chcą się dowiadywać,
places,
tylko
and
często właśnie brakuje
it's lacking
tych
also in
miejsc i
the
brakuje
school curriculum.
przeważnie
So
nauczycieli,
teachers
miejsc
are not
programów,
talking
które
about it.
pomogą.
So the same question for you, Mr.
Jeszcze raz
Jacek.
to
Are
samo
young
pytanie,
Europeans
Jacku.
aware
Czy
of what
młodzi
has
Europejczycy
happened in
są świadomi
1989? I think that
tego, co się
young Germans, I think, I don't know, but I suspect that they are much more aware of what has happened in 1989 compared to young Poles, not even to mention other young Europeans. In other parts of Europe, I think that this knowledge is really tiny insofar as ourselves. Why do I think that it's on a better level in Germany? Because the reunification of Germany was consensual. Of course, there are various evaluation, assessments, etc., but all Germans were happy about it. And there is no discussion about this, no doubt about it, that it was right, that it was good. In Poland, unfortunately, we have such dramatic political divisions insofar as the evaluations of what has happened in 1989. Balcerowicz reforms, political reforms, selling ourselves to communists, etc., etc., that teachers, even if they would find a time at the end of the school year to teach about it, they're simply afraid right now because they are afraid that it might be too political. They might say something, and the consequences of that, well, it reminds me of the communist times, that people were afraid to say the truth, were afraid to say something about what they think about the past, about cutting, for example. Throughout the whole communism, there was silence about cutting, massacre. So I think that even Polish youth doesn't know much. I make a test when I have lectures or exercises with my students, university students. I show them 3 photographs. The first one is the round table. The second one is an election poster from 1989. And the third one is a nice, friendly gentleman who, and it says 3 times yes, and he's a very cultural guy, but a sad guy. And there are the benches in the same behind him. That was Tadeusz Mazowiecki. And I'm asking them, which year does it make you think of? To my students, what is on that picture, on that image? And it's really bad. In Poland, they don't know. Well, we know why. It's true. You're right, Madame Gabriela, because this is the margin.
Rzeczywiście
I think that
pani ma
Mieszko the
absolutną
First
rację.
and
No to jest
Otto,
już taki margines. O Mieszku pierwszym
when they met together 1000 years ago, Polish youth, Polish children know more about it than about 1989 and what has happened 30 years ago, what has changed the Polish situation. And thanks to that, we have democracy in Poland. This is very sad, especially because the reunification of Germany. This was very important, that borders in Europe change. One state disappears, another becomes bigger. Insofar as 1989, this is our internal process, so it's less spectacular from the perspective of a longer time. In Poland, all neighbors have changed. We don't have the neighbors like we used to have before 1989. It's true. So what about the following proposal? How would you comment to the idea all European joint common celebration of 1989 for whole Europe? This is a step towards the European integration. This is a threshold to it. So what would you think about it and what it could look like so that we could do it together, celebrate, remember 1989 for all of us Europeans? I think this is a great idea. And I support this idea very much, but it has to be very well prepared. Maybe the 50th anniversary or something like that. This should be prepared very well all over Europe. I remember the celebration of the reunification of Germany 10 years ago, and I have to admit that in 2019, I don't remember 3 years ago. I think it wasn't as big, but in 2009, there was a great idea to recreate the wall as dominoes pieces. So at the very beginning of the wall, so this was the entire wall, several kilometers or so. There were domino pieces, and the first ones were the flags. And the very first one was the Polish one. Lech Wałęsa, who has, I don't know, dropped the first piece of domino, and the whole domino fell down. So this showed that Poland was at the very beginning. Germans have stressed that, yeah, of course, that was the wall and the wall fell, but at the very beginning was Poland, and the main hero of all of that was Lech Wałęsa, who was dressed in white, and he was standing there, and he just pushed this domino, and it fell down. It was amazing. This was a symbol. And it would be good to do something like that, something different. Or maybe the same, I don't know. Someone has to invent it. Someone has to think about it. But we can organize something like that everywhere. In Poland, we can come up with something around the round table. In Hungary, of course, this border that was cut, something about that. In all those countries, we can invent, we can think of something that we could show. In my opinion, this is a great idea, and it should last, let's say, a month, that you would travel. There will be a cheap ticket, cheap train ticket, and you could travel all over Europe and visit everywhere. There's ideas for this celebration, for this anniversary, so I support it very much. Great idea. Following your idea, we could make those freedom trains that go to various states, various countries, the freedom train. I wouldn't like to wait until the 50th anniversary, to be honest. Let's take it step by step.
taki pociąg
and
wolności.
introduce certain things immediately.
Ja nie chciałbym czekać do 50. rocznicy,
I
powiem pani
think
szczerze.
that
Wolałbym
speaking about
step by
freedom
step,
with youth,
krok
about
po kroku
how in Europe,
wprowadzać pewne
at
rzeczy
various
od razu.
stages of history, in the last, let's say,
Myślę,
100
że
years,
rozmawiać
how this
o
freedom has
wolności
changed,
z młodzieżą,
to find a
o tym,
leitmotiv
jak w
under the title
Europie w
freedom
różnych momentach
yesterday and
historycznych,
today.
ostatnich
Because
tam,
freedom,
nie
I
wiem,
talk
dajmy na to
with
100
youth
lat.
about freedom a lot.
Jak ta wolność się zmieniała.
We have
Znaleźć
workshop
jakiś
for
taki
high
leitmotiv
schoolers mainly.
pod tytułem
And
wolność
I talk to
wczoraj i
them
dziś.
about
Bo
the
młodzież
restrictions
nasza,
or
ja
limitations
rozmawiam
to
bardzo dużo z
freedom
młodzieżą
here
w tej
and
chwili na
now,
temat wolności,
of self-government
samorządności i
also,
solidarności.
self-governing for
Prowadzimy
the
takie
young
warsztaty
generation.
dla
And this is a
licealistów
very
głównie.
topical
Wolność,
subject.
samorządność, solidarność.
Also,
I
the
rozmawiam z
limitations
nimi
to
na temat
solidarity
ograniczeń
here and now.
wolności
And I
tu i
think
teraz.
these are very important subjects
Ograniczeń
to speak
samorządności
with
tu i
youth.
teraz
They will be
dla
always
tego młodego
topical
pokolenia.
now,
I to
today,
jest
in 10
strasznie
years and in
ważne
20,
tematy.
because
Ograniczeń
youth
też
has this
solidarności
need for
z innymi
freedom. And
tu
it's
i teraz.
wonderful.
I
It's
myślę,
not
że
like
to jest
us. We
bardzo
say,
dobre
okay, we don't have
tematy
any
do
strength
rozmowy
for
z
that
młodzieżą,
anymore.
bo one zawsze będą aktualne.
Sorry,
Teraz i za
I'm
5 lat,
speaking
i za
to
10,
everyone
i za
here, but
20.
you do
Bo
have the
młodzież
strength. You
ma
have the
tę
power to
potrzebę
fight
wolności.
for
I to
this
jest
freedom, to
wspaniałe,
be free
że
from
nie tak
polluted
jak my,
air,
że żeśmy trochę,
free
już
from
mamy
the
na to siły.
wrong
Oni mają
exploitation
też,
of
wy-
Mother
przepraszam,
Earth,
mówię do
etc.
was,
These
słuchających nas,
freedom
wy macie do tego
subjects
siłę,
are
żeby o
still
tę wolność
existent.
walczyć. O wolność
You can
od
see it in Polish
brudnego
streets and
powietrza,
Belarusian
o
streets
wolność
everywhere.
od,
May I?
złego wykorzystywania matki ziemi i tak dalej, i tak dalej.
Because I'm
Tematy
thinking-
wolnościowe są
Yeah, we could do it earlier. We don't have to necessarily wait until the 50th anniversary. So we could start much earlier.
Myślę, że rzeczywiście
think about
można
very
już
interesting
wcześniej.
projects.
Nie trzeba koniecznie tam czekać na
You've mentioned
50.
freedom.
rocznicę. Więc można rzeczywiście o wiele wcześniej
I
tam
don't
już
think these
zacząć
projects
i
can
wymyślić,
be only
bardzo
historical.
ciekawe
This is not
projekty.
going to be attractive.
I to,
It
co
has
pan
to do with the
powiedział tam z
contemporary
wolnością.
life. What does it
Więc,
mean today for us?
myślę, że to
Freedom.
nie, te projekty
We cannot
nie
just
mogą
speak
być
about the
już
past
tylko
that our
wyłącznie
fathers, mothers
To już nie
were
ciąga.
fighting for freedom,
To
but what
musi być
we
coś,
are
co jest
doing right
związane
now
z
with that
życiem
freedom,
dzisiejszym.
what our
Czyli
children
jak-
do with the
Co to
freedom.
znaczy dla nas
What does it
dzisiaj
look
ta
like?
wolność?
And we
Czyli
can
to nie może być,
include
że wtedy
also the
właśnie
fight
nasi
for
ojcowie,
better climate, etc.
matki i tak
There
dalej
are
walczyli o
various
wolność,
things, various
tylko co my
projects that
teraz
could be
robimy z tą
connected to that.
wolnością?
And the
Co nasze
beginning
dzieci robią z tą
could be the
wolnością? Jak to wszystko
1989,
wygląda?
but we
I,
cannot stop
można
at
tam
that
też
and
włączyć,
just
też
admire,
nawet walką
saying that was
o lepszy
great.
klimat i
That
tak
will
dalej.
not
Więc,
work.
to,
It has to
to
be
można
about the
różne,
future.
różne projekty tam
1989 is just an occasion, it's an excuse to talk about the future. Absolutely, we have to talk about the future. Summarizing what you've said, I'm very happy that we are sitting here and we are talking about the project Breaching the Walls. We do need education because this is it. This is a small step and this has to be stressed. We do need education. We need to talk.
Ale to podsumowując
I
państwa
think
wypowiedzi,
and I hope
w sumie
that making these small steps we will be able to
projekcie
finally
Breaching the
experience
Walls, We
beautiful
Do Need Education,
celebrations
bo
of
to jest właśnie to,
1989
to jest
because
właśnie
for
mały
me
kroczek,
this
jest to
is really
podkreślenie.
beautiful.
We
Now
do
I
need
would like
education.
to
Właśnie
give
potrzebujemy
the
tej
floor,
edukacji, właśnie potrzebujemy tej
give the
rozmowy.
possibility
Miejmy nadzieję, że
to our
rozpoczynając takie
viewers,
małe kroki,
they could
doczekamy
ask us some
pięknych
questions.
obchodów europejskich.
I have a
Są
chat
to
when they're
widzimy
here,
tego
and
roku.
if there are any questions, they'll be
Dla mnie
sent to
przepiękna.
us all, and I would like to encourage everyone
Chciałbym
to
teraz
ask these questions.
oddać głos, możliwość właśnie zadawania pytań naszym słuchaczom. Jestem obecny na czacie. Jeżeli ktoś z Państwa ma jakieś pytania, to zostaną one tutaj przesłane nam wszystkim.
Dużo się nie pobawię.
Zachęcamy do ich zadawania.
Ja chciałem powiedzieć, że to jest strasznie smutne, że my was nie widzimy, bo to jednak bardzo, mnie jest bardzo przykro, że was nie widzimy. O, tak bym powiedział.
Tak, ja myślę tak samo.
I would like to say that it's very sad that we don't see you all, because, well, I'm very sorry that I don't see you. Yes, yes, yes. I think along these lines, I think the same. Well, in particular, let's wait, because, well, the process of passing the questions may take some time, so let us hope that we'll get some. Well, to use the time before we have the questions, I think that the project of celebration of 1989 Europe-wide, I will go for that, and I hope that we'll do something together in the future in this matter, in particular for Germany and in particular for Poland. Of course, the Czech, Slovakia, and so on and so forth were present, but we have a very special role to play. The Germans, as the country which is the biggest in the strongest in Europe, a leader of the change in Europe of the 21st century, in Poland that, well, has had its being the forefront of the Western world in the East. So in Polish-German partnership, we could develop a pan-European project that would give us an opportunity to talk about the future and about freedom and about those values with the young people, with a view to the future. And I think it's a great idea. Well, we have to invent a title, a good title. Freedom. Yes, we'll find. Well, we've had great tradition of dialogue in our Polish-German relations. What we shouldn't limit ourselves, what we are doing here under this project, we involve various institutions from Albania, Germany, France, Italy, the Czech Republic, and that's also great to take a deeper look or further look to compare different perspectives. I've got feedback that there are no questions. The last chance. Anything would you like to add? Maybe. Yes, there are already various projects developed during that time and still existing, still active. I've joined, well, in Germany and in Poland to an initiative, and I keep on collaborating there. Well, it's of course not that I spend all the time there to be involved all the time. I don't have so much time, but already in that time, different initiatives were originated and they've been continued until today. In Germany, they established an organization of undergraduate students, so scholarships from students to students, roughly speaking. And that was initiated in Germany, and it was German scholarship holders who used to be earlier in Poland. They organized such a community, such an association. So we simply collected money in a private manner. We invited undergraduate students from Poland, and later on, after 1989, it continued, and a sister or mirror organization was established in Poland, and now the Poles also invite students for students. They invite German students to Poland. Now we all work together. I'm not a student anymore, but it's still students, generation after generation of students. So now we are going to invite students from the Czech Republic, from Ukraine, from Belarus, and we'll invite them to Germany and to Poland. So it's been developing, and it was already initiated during that time and is existing. So on the Polish side, I've joined an organization which is called Borussia, cultural and so on, community. And this association is based in Olsztyn. And the idea is that all nations who have dealt with that area, which used to be Eastern Prussia, part of Eastern Prussia, it's the Swedes, the Russians, the Germans, the Poles, the Ukrainians, and so on and so forth, that all these nations may somehow collaborate, of course, locally. This is how it's supposed to function. So they would come there would be conferences, and the cultural center today is a building that was designed by Mendelssohn as the first one, as the first architectural building that he erected. And it used to be located in a Jewish cemetery. The cemetery was destroyed as a cemetery. It still exists as a cemetery, but the building is used as a cultural center with invited guests, and it works very well. And I think both this and that organization both work very well. And there are many more organizations down there created during that time and still existing today. So it's not that it was only a date and history, and that's the end of it. Things are still continued until today that were established then. And of course, today it would be great if, while talking about we could coordinate the actions, activities of these organizations, because they do ingenious, great job, individual in their respective sectors. They have great results. Jacek, would you like to add anything? Yes. To the list of organizations worth approaching is the Krzyżowa. Yes, this is the place where Tadeusz Mazowiecki, together with Helmut Kohl, made this symbolic gesture of hugging each other, approaching. A very important organization, great place, by the way, still to be used even more. A reflection has crossed me that a pan-European project called, say, Coalition 89 of both different civil organizations, youth groups, and the elderly as well would be a great idea, and that would give an additional dimension in Poland, educational. Here in Poland, we have this national vice that we are very, very much concentrated on ourselves. We are self-centered, and we think that we are the most important on the globe, and the fact that we are Poles and Catholics is the most important thing in the world. But in fact, the most important thing is that we are humans, that we are people. And we know very little as a result of this self-centering, what happened in 1989 in countries such as other countries of the former socialist camp, and in particular, we know very little what has happened and happens in relation to democracy in the countries of the former Soviet Union. These countries, we owe the repayment of a debt. We've managed to join NATO, to join the European Union. They haven't managed to do it yet. They have a lot to do in front of us. Lots of these countries of the former Soviet Union, they have problems with democracy. And our interest in those countries and our, let's say, through 1989, our memory about those values and thinking about the future, but also about those countries that, like Belarus, for example, or Russia, have great problems with democracy. So I think that while thinking about the future, let's not think only about our future, that of Europe or European community, but more broadly about European space.
Młodzi Polacy nic nie
And
wiedzą, co się dzieje w
we
Kazachstanie,
have deficit
co
of
się
knowledge.
dzieje
Young
w
Poles know
Uzbekistanie,
nothing
czy
about what
nawet
the
Rosji.
developments
To
in
jest
Kazakhstan,
skandal.
Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and even Russia.
Polska
It's
geograficznie
scandalous.
jesteśmy najbliżej
In
i Białorusi, i
that
Ukrainy,
it's
do
Polish
których
geographically,
rozmawiamy
we are the
codziennie,
closest to Belarus and
to
Ukraine.
my jesteśmy tą autostradą,
We have common
właśnie
borders, so we are this freedom highway. And as we have gone through at least part of our society, have gone through a lot of time in the communist region, we understand better what is happening in the countries which are not democratic states, which are post-Soviet authoritarian, quasi-authoritarian
No
states.
dobrze, widzę, że wciąż nie mamy
Well,
żadnych pytań, więc
I can
to
see
bardzo
we don't
podziękować
have
jeszcze
any
raz,
questions yet, so I'd
naszym
like to
gościom,
thank you
pani
once
Gabrieli
again
Lesser,
to our guest, Gabriela Lesser. Thank you
oraz,
very much.
panu Jackowi
And
Michałowskiemu.
Jacek
Bardzo
Michałowski, many, many
A ja
thanks.
chciałbym jeszcze odsłonić,
And I would like to
plakat na
open
moim,
up
za moimi
the poster behind me.
Zwycięzca Święto
Behind me.
Święto Wolności. Tak jest.
Yes, it's a festival of freedom,
Ym,
4th
Chciałbym również
of June.
podziękować wszystkim naszym
And I would like to thank
Zachęcam
all
do
our
odwiedzenia
viewers.
strony
I encourage you to
projektu
visit
Video
our
z
website
Education, gdzie
under
znajdują się
Bridging the
wszystkie
Walls We
materiały,
Do Need
wszystkie
Education,
wywiady,
where all the
jak
materials,
również,
all the interviews, and
nagrania z
also
konferencji,
recording of
a,
this conference for those who could not
skoro
see
tak
us.
czekamy na wspaniałe
And
obchody.
we wait for this great celebration of the 1989 great commemoration, which would be pan-European. Thank you once again.
Spotkań z
I
historią.
think the
Warto,
History
żeby
Meeting
dom
House,
spotkań z
it would
historią
be
był
worthwhile
takim
to
miejscem,
be a
gdzie
meeting
możemy te różne
place where we
inicjatywy,
could
że tak powiem, podsyłać. Ja
focus or
już
send
wyślę
this
wam
initiative. I'll
one
send
page,
you one
który mi się w
page.
głowie majaczy.
I've just conceived, just crossed my mind.
Dziękujemy.
Thank you very much.
Dobrego.
Thank you. All the best.
Do widzenia.
See you next time.
Piękne, do widzenia.
Thank you.